Hello and welcome to this exploring workshop. This is a workshop looking at two scenes from the true tragedy of Richard III, a play which we are going to be doing as a second look. We've done a first look read through where we went through the play very slowly and discussed it at great length in very interesting ways. I do encourage you to go and view those videos. They are really very useful, actually, for the process of what we're about to do now, as well as if you were thinking of doing these plays in the future, go and watch. They're useful, and just put it on in the background, relax, let the words and the discussion flow over you. Like and subscribe. Anyway, this workshop is in part a warm-up for the next two sessions when we do our fast-paced run at the text. Not perfect, but we're aiming to just get a better grip at the play at speed. It also is in part prep of a show that we've half got in our minds of looking at the character of Jane Shaw. Jane Shaw turns up in a lot of texts. She definitely appears quite spectacularly in Edward IV, but also in other material that is available. So we're quite keen on playing around with just her material and focusing in on her character. But we also have additional workshop questions that we're going to be working through today, which deal with how we frame what happens when a text is about misogyny, but is also sometimes misogynistic at the same time. How do we deal with that in the modern age? And Shaw's Wife really raises that question as a text in this play of a character who is who manages to straddle both of those elements. There are lots of questions about the play that I'm interested in trying to address, about how asides work, who are people talking to, and to a degree how we might do the asides, or for that matter talking to a wider room in these scenes, but also in the rest of the play, so that hopefully we can start making some choices. I'm quite interested in looking at this play through a sort of Brechtian lens, but whether we get round to doing any of that, goodness only knows. I've been going on for a fair old while now. I'm your host, Robert Crighton, and I'll be introducing the other members of the reading group this afternoon as and when they appear. So we're going to basically look at scene 3 as we've got it labelled. You could label it in different ways. There are only 2 scenes with Jane Shaw in this play. So I'm going to start reading through just bit by bit scene 3. We're going to start with Jane Shaw herself, with Sarah, and also reading, just for this workshop only, the maid Hursley will be Helen, and we'll just get that opening gambit out.
O Fortune, wherefore wert thou called Fortune, but that thou art fortunate? Those whom thou favourest be famous, meriting mere mercy, and fraught with mirrors of magnanimity. And Fortune, I would thou hadst never favoured me.
My mistress, if you exclaim against Fortune, you condemn yourself. For who hath advanced you but Fortune?
Ay, as she hath advanced me, so may she throw me down. But Hursley, dost not hear the king is sick?
Yes, mistress, but never heard that every sick man died.
O Hursley, my mind presageth some great mishaps unto me. The last time I saw the king, methought ghastly death approached in his face. For thou knowest this, Hursley, I have been good to all, and still ready to prefer my friends to what preferment I could. For what was it his grace would deny Shaw's wife of anything? Yea, were it half his revenues, I know his grace would not see me want. And if his grace should die, as heaven forfends, it should be so, I have left me nothing now to comfort me withal. And then those that are my foes will triumph at my fall. But if the king escape, as I hope he will, then will I feather my nest, that blow the stormy winter never so cold, I will be thoroughly provided for one. But here comes Lodowick, servant to Lord Hastings. How now, Lodowick? What news?
And before we get to Lodowick, who will be read by Alan in a moment, I just want to talk about the setting of this scene. So this is a public place, I think. It starts feeling like it might be in some sort of internal space, but it does seem that there are an awful lot of people just wandering by. I don't think they're calling on Jane Shaw, unless I'm horribly wrong about that. So it's an interesting question about Shaw speaking outside, who's listening, and her maid with her about the situation. We don't know if the king. She does not know the king is dead. The king has just literally died. So there is this big question for everyone in the scene as to what is the state of play with the king? Is the king alive? And you do not know the answer, and that's a really important thing of the uncertainty. Any thoughts about the scene so far and options as we go? Helen.
I can see her setting off on an errand of mercy with some provisions or some money or something, attended by her maid. I mean, a street scene seems plausible.
Sarah.
Yeah, we should probably work out which it is, because that works. What Helen just said, works for me. Like if we're like walking side by side down a street, that's going to create a different public vibe. Like I think we could probably be more relaxed with each other. Whereas if we're in a sort of, say we're somewhere in some public space within the castle where the king is dying and we're waiting for news, and I'm standing there and she's attending me, then that's going to create a different kind of atmosphere. We'd probably be a bit more whispery, maybe, so we weren't overheard. So which is it like a public space where we're standing and there could be people listening, or is it a public space where we're walking down the street and we can be a bit more
That's a really good question. I like the idea that you're waiting outside for news. You're standing by a gate somewhere, and maybe you're it's that fiddling with a fag thing, kind of fortune, and thinking of fortune as with a capital F as well. That it's not just your luck; it's that fortune is as a personified figure as well. Lots of hands and possibilities. Alan, then Eric.
I'm just thinking the previous play in which we saw Jane Shaw, she was trying to maintain the goldsmith's business, which was what her husband had done, if my memory serves me correctly. So one plausible scenario of the staging could be that it's she and her maid preparing the shop for opening, which will give you the advantage of the street scene, which would give the excuse for the various passers-by, and the fact that they're two ladies who are, doing a job which has got to be done, but which isn't massively enthralling, could explain the somewhat relaxed chat between the two of them.
Well, I mean, there is a question, because it's why, mistress, if you exclaim against fortune, how relaxed Shaw's opening line should be, whether we take that as being too literal or not. I like the idea. I mean, this text does not at any point really situate her in that vein, but it doesn't clash with it at all. I think that's actually a really interesting idea. Other thoughts, Eric?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the assessment is probably correct, because, like, Lodowick sounds like he's been looking for them, and it doesn't, as you said, it doesn't situate them anywhere. But like he would probably not hunt them down, so to speak, but he would try to, it sounds like he knows where they are.
Oh yeah, Lodowick is it does seem to be coming specifically for them. We will have Citizen and etc. who look like they're more passing you by, or maybe looking for Lodowick. Yeah. Other thoughts? I thought I saw hands and things. I obviously imagined it. Again, not going to make any immediate decisions now, but I think by the time we finish this scene, it would be quite nice if we've got some actions that we can throw into next time. So yeah, lots of anxiety. You don't know what's going on, and you have this entrance of Lodowick, who is going to be has news potentially. He's got a message and knows some stuff. So Alan has a secret. So if we can just go from the last couple of lines, here comes Lodowick. I won't read the stage direction in between. Carry on the scene.
But here comes Lodowick, servant to Lord Hastings. How now, Lodowick? What news?
Mr. Shaw, my lord would request you to come and speak with him.
I will, Lodowick, but tell me, what news? Is the king recovered?
Aye, Mr. Shaw, he hath recovered, that he longed looked for.
Lodowick, how long is it since he began to mend?
Even when the greatest of his torments had left him.
But are the nobles agreed to the contentment of the prince?
The nobles and peers are agreed as the king would with them.
Lodowick, thou revivest me.
Aye, but few thought that the agreement and his life would have ended together.
Why? Lodowick, is he dead?
In brief, Mistress Shaw, he hath changed his life.
His life? Oh, me, unhappy woman. Now is misery at hand. Oh, now will my foes triumph at this my fall. Those who I have done most good will now forsake me. Oh, Hursley, when I entertained thee first, I was far from change. So was I, Lodowick, when I restored thee thy lands. Oh, sweet Edward. Farewell, my gracious lord and sovereign. For now shall Shaw's wife be a mirror and a looking glass to all her enemies. Thus shall I find, Lodowick, and have cause to say that all men are unconstant.
Why, Mistress Shaw, for the loss of one friend, will you abandon the rest that wish you well?
Oh, Lodowick, I must. For when the tree decays, whose fruitful branch hath flourished many a year, then farewell those joyful days and offspring of my heart. But say, Lodowick, who hath the king made protector during the minority of the young prince?
He hath made his brother Duke of Gloucester protector.
Oh me. Then comes my ruin and decay. For he could never abide me to the death, no. He always hated me, whom his brother loved so well. Thus must I lament and say, all the world is unconstant.
But Mistress Shaw, comfort yourself, and think well of my lord, who hath always been a helper unto you.
Indeed, Lodowick, to condemn his honour I cannot, for he hath always been my good lord. For as the world is fickle, so changeth the minds of men.
Why, Mistress Shaw, rather than want should oppress you, that little land which you begged for me of the king shall be at your dispose.
Thanks, good Lodowick.
At which point we're just going to pause. Yes, so there's all sorts of interesting. So Lodowick's leading you down a garden path with obfuscation. And it's an interesting question. Why is Lodowick doing this?
Why
is
does
he
he
just
do that?
really pedantic, or is and the thing is, because he's leading you in that direction, you're getting hopeful and excited, and everything's fine. Phew, we're not destitute. I can start. Setting aside a nest egg, which I forgot to do earlier, which is a really interesting part of that earlier speech, and then it's his life would have ended together, and it's just that the higher you are before that, the thunkier it will land when you the penny drops, and gives you room for manoeuvre there. But yeah, and it's this question of who are your friends, and what Lodowick again is possibly leading you to the idea that you will all these other people are your friends too. Of course, they're still your friends. My master's still your friend. Of course we are. And I think it's important that Lodowick is reassures you on some level there, even though you're not convinced. because we know it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong. And to play with those. Alan.
The way I see it is that despite the past history of Shaw's wife's intervention on his behalf at some earlier time, he's now very firmly hitched his fortunes to those of the Lord Hastings, and is basically going to be playing the main chance going forward. And Hastings is presumably, in his view at this time, a better bet.
Well, it's that thing of what have you done for me recently? Aliki.
It's also psychologically common, for people to resent those to whom they owe gratitude.
I still don't know if we've got an answer as to why Lodowick is so unhelpful at the beginning of the scene. But then maybe there isn't an answer. We can just make one up. Francis, Eric, then Sarah.
Well, it occurs to me there could be an element of self-importance here on Lodowick's part. When people have momentous news to impart, like the death of a king, I mean, you can't get much more important than that. People sort of, like, oh, yeah, well, I've got something important to tell you, and I'm going to take my own sweet time doing it. And there's kind of a drum roll, maybe there's kind of drum roll element here. He's leading up to this big news.
Yeah, pompous ass just can't resist setting the Scene. Eric, Sarah, and then Helen.
I was just going to say that it might just be the human thing of not wanting to deliver bad news, but sort of, I don't know if that's just me. Because I've not been here for the first look, so yeah.
Yeah, well, it might, because it might also fit with what he says later on, which is, these are all your friends. These will all help you. The Lord, these people will be good to you. Maybe he just doesn't want to say the truth, which is, yeah, this is the last message I'm delivering to you. Kind of thing. So maybe we're being unkind to Lodowick, and he's just feeling socially awkward throughout this whole scene. It could be that. Again, I'm not going to say you have to do it either way. At the moment, I'm just looking for options. Sarah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it will change how I do it depending on that choice, because I mean, the primary thing she's concerned with is the king and the king being alive, and then, oh no, the king is dead, and that is going to drive everything else from her mind. But having said that, once we get to the end of that exchange, if she feels there's an element of him that he's been playing with her, I think then there's room to find a line or a half a line where she can be a bit resentful with him. There could be a bit of edge in what she says to him. Whereas if it's more the case that he's genuinely, shit, I don't want to break this news, and he's feeling awkward and he just kind of mangles it, then that is going to create a very different sort of, if that's how she's feeling about him, then that's how that informs that colors how I perform it. So it's with all these things, it's having the different options is really interesting, but it's also kind of good to know, which one to go for, for reading.
We are moving in the direction of making a decision, but I don't want to make a decision yet. Helen.
This giving the news of someone's death by saying, oh no, they're fine now, is such a trope in early modern drama that there is one play, and I cannot for the life of me remember which, in which the person actually is improved, and they say, you're not saying he's improved meaning he's dead, are you? Because I mean it is such a commonplace to do it that way. But nevertheless, I mean, I speak as someone who actually had to deliver the news of someone's death. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
It really, really isn't. And you you try and find all sorts of ways of not having to arrive at that point of the conversation.
We're going to just finish the scene because there isn't much. It's a relatively short scene. We're just going to get a bit more data. Alan, briefly.
Yeah, just a quick question. I think a lot will depend on the Shaw's wife's final line in that sequence as to whether that is genuine thanks or whether there's an edge to it.
Yeah. We will see what the other entering characters change to that. I mean, Lodowick only has 2 more lines, I think, in this scene. Potentially discuss. So we'll read it as it's currently formatted, and now we have the entrance of a citizen and Morton, a serving man, coming in now. So let's see how this adds to our understanding of what choices we might want to make.
Oh, Master Morton, you are very welcome met. I hope you think on me for my money.
I pray, sir, bear with me, and you shall have it, with thanks too.
Nay, I pray, sir, let me have my money, for I have had thanks and too much more than I looked for.
In faith, sir, you shall have it, but you must bear with me a little. But, sir, I marvel how you can be so greedy for your money, when you see, sir, we are so uncertain of our own.
How so uncertain of mine own? Why, dost thou know anybody will come to rob me?
Why, no.
Wilt thou come in the night and cut my throat?
No.
Wilt thou and the rest of thy companions come and set my house on fire?
Why, no, I tell thee.
Why, how then should I be uncertain of mine own?
Why, sir, by reason the king is dead.
Oh, sir, is the king dead? I hope he hath given you no quittance for my debt.
No, sir, but I pray stay a while, and you shall have it as soon as I can.
Well, I must be content where nothing is to be had. The king loseth his right, they say, but who is this?
Marry, sir, it is Mistress Shaw, to whom I am more beholden for my service than the dearest friend that I ever had.
And I for my son's pardon.
Now, Mistress Shaw, how fare you?
Well, Morton, but not so well as thou hast known me, for I think I shall be driven to try my friends one day.
God forfend, Mistress Shaw, and happy be that sun shall shine upon thee for preserving the life of my son.
Gramercy's good father. But how doth thy son? Is
The
he well?
better that thou lives, doth he.
Thanks, father, I am glad of it. But come, Master Lodowick, shall we go? And you, Morton, you'll bear us company?
Aye, Mistress Shaw, my lord thinks long for our coming.
There, Huffer. But by your leave, the king's death is a maim to her credit. But they say there is my Lord Hastings in the court. He is as good as the ace of hearts at Moor. Well, even as they brew, so let them bake for me. But I must about the streets to see, and I can meet with such cold customers as I met with all even now. Mas, if I meet with no better, I'm like to keep a bad household of it.
And exit the citizen at the end there. There was a question Alexandra brought up earlier about one of the lines by Morton, whether it should be the citizen. It does seem that, yeah, that's absolutely right. So I'm going to make a note to inform. So citizen, who is in the room, Eric, that is you. So that Morton line, God forfend Mistress Shaw, must be yours.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wait, where is that?
So it's God forfend Mistress Shaw. It's about 5-6 lines up from
5 or 6
Oh,
lines
okay.
up.
That whole speech is the citizens?
I
or-
think so. I can't see a way
Yeah.
of breaking it in two. I did look to see if one starts with more, or maybe they both say it together, God forfend Mistress Shaw, and then the citizen continues it. But I think for practical purposes, we'll just give that all to the citizen.
Yeah, that does actually make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was wondering whose son it was who she'd saved, because
It's the
both of them.
citizen.
Yeah, it's the citizen's
Yeah.
son who said just a few lines earlier. So Alexandra was exactly right. Though again, it might be that I wonder whether they should say that God forfend in unison or something like that, or that first bit's Morton and then the rest is both. But it doesn't quite work as two separate sentences, so I'm not going to do that. So we just need to make sure that that Morton knows tomorrow that they have lost some lines. That's fine. I make a note. It's a tragedy. So in more ways than one. So yeah, it's interesting. Shaw's wife says thanks, good Lodovick, and then we have Citizen and Morton ostensibly having their own conversation about the same situation. They're not talking to them for quite a long time. I'm wondering what Shaw's wife and are they watching this happening, or are they continuing a conversation? I don't think we should attempt to continue a conversation for tomorrow, because that will look weird. But I think just standing there anxious is probably just the continuum we can do. But on stage, I think you just retire to one side a bit and speak. I mean, God only knows what Hursley's doing to all of this.
So you don't want Hursley and I to react. You don't want us to be aware of what they're saying. We're just off to one side.
Yeah, I think maybe just move on, and just be doing anxious acting.
I mean, would it make sense if Hursley exited at the point when Lodowick enters?
It might be.
You can't leave her unattended. It wouldn't be right.
Yeah.
I mean, just because a bloke's come on, and I mean, unless she's directed to go, or this is a situation which it isn't, then that she needs a maid with her. It's respectability.
So we will keep the maid in sight. We'll live that with and a lot of reaction acting, which is important. So yeah, Citizen and Morton having this back and forth. I think with Citizen, the line with "Oh sir, is the king dead? I hope he have given you no quittance of my debt." That's an oh shit moment. Hang on, I'm a bit behind the times. What did you just say? So yeah, there's obviously lots of anxiety abroad about the state of health, but the news of the king's death is only just hitting the streets. It's not quite hit the public sphere yet. So yeah, any additional thoughts about those? Aliki, then Eric.
Sorry, I'm muting. So I took that line as sarcastic. Oh, well, what's the king got to do with it? You still owe me money. Because the whole rest of the conversation after that is because he thinks Morton is about to renege on his debt, or has reneged on his debt, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of the Citizen sees Morton and grabs him by the collar at the beginning. Yeah. Very welcome, Met.
So before he's like, so are you threatening me with your friends? Is that what's going to happen if I ask for my money? You're going to burn my house down, right? And then it's like, oh, so it's the king then. Oh, is the king responsible for your debt? And now he's dead, I can't have my money. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That it kind of reads very sort of, oh, is the king dead? I'm so sorry, but you still have to pay me back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in that case, you need to be a lot more aggressive in terms of you want your money back from the top of the scene. I think that sense, because at the moment you're being it's all awfully nice about this money you owe me. People are not nice about money they're owed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see the Citizen actually getting more and more riled during the course of this. With Morton is just trying to push away from actually paying his debts, and the Citizen is getting more and more wound up.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the king's dead is it's a pretty flimsy excuse for not paying.
Yeah, but also
the flowers that bloom in the spring have nothing to do with the case.
So Helen.
Yes, I think the king is dead. He's giving us a reason. And the Citizen, oh, sir, is the king dead? I didn't know that. And then suddenly a dawning realization that he may have sold the debt to the king. I mean, there may be some legal thing. Oh shit, I hope he hath given you no quittance for my debt. And Morton says, no.
And then the citizen finds a distraction.
Yeah.
I don't know why the citizen would do that. Morton is the person who's ring. Oh, look, there's someone over there. And they engage with Mistress Shaw. Sarah.
Yeah, I just wonder. The citizen obviously accosts Morton in the street. You can imagine he's been looking for him.
Yeah, Morton is not pleased.
Yeah.
Morton does not want to be found.
No, but I wonder why Morton is there in the first place. And it just occurred to me, is he also going to find Jane Shaw because he wants to be the one to break the news to her?
To whom I am more beholden to for my service than the dearest friend that ever I had. Now, Mistress Shaw, how fare you? Which is all, unfortunately, we get from Morton in to Shaw. So yeah. So we've got a sense of the shape of the things. There's an interesting question about the citizen at the end. They're Huffer, but by your leave, Huffer. It's interesting.
What does it mean, Huffer?
Well, that's why I was asking.
The way you said it, I just kind of assumed that you were. Oh,
no,
yes,
I'm not leading
pondering.
to. I'm not leading to any kind of explication. I don't quite know. It is a name to her credit.
Huffer seems like it seems like he's using that to refer to Mrs. Shaw.
It does seem to. The citizen is talking about Mistress Shaw at that point. Yeah.
It could be a term of endearment.
It could also not.
Yeah.
it could literally mean the opposite. That's one to try and
or is it he's referring to Morton as someone who's trying to escape paying his bills? Is Huffer slang for someone who Welshes on their debts?
The king's death is a maim to her credit.
So maybe Morton is trying to slink off at this point when Mistress Shaw's leaving.
Yep.
He's trying to go, and the citizen grabs us like, there, Huffer. And then he talks about Jane,
So
but by your leave, the king's death is a
Morton
maim to
doesn't
her.
exit with everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question.
I think that makes some sense because there doesn't seem any point in Morton leaving other than as to try and escape having to come to terms with paying his obligations.
That then changes this from an aside to something he's saying to someone. Eric.
Well, according to the Century Dictionary, Huffer is a swagger, a bluster. I'm not sure what
So
that
it feels
means.
like that's to Morton, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, Citizen, could you just do that speech again? Just I want to hear it, see if some of it is an aside or whether it's all to Morton. That's I wasn't planning on doing this. Let's just give that again as though you're talking to Morton.
There, Huffer. But by your leave, the king's death is a maim to her credit. But they say there is my Lord Hastings in the court. He is as good as the ace of hearts at more. Well, even as they brew, so let them bake for me. But I must about the streets to see, and I can meet with such cold customers as they I met with all even now. Mass, if I meet with no better, I'm like to keep a bad household of it. It feels like the last bit is an aside, but then the first bit is not.
I think it's like he's patting him on the back, saying, "Why didn't you go to Lord Hastings to see if he'll give you some money?"
Yeah.
And after Ace of Hearts at Moor, exit Morton, and then the rest is to the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's some instruction that I can email out. Exit there. Lovely. Okay, so we're not going to go over this again because I want to look at scene 11 in more detail, but I think we can make some decisions here that we can try and transmit. I like the idea, I'm going to shoot me down, I like the idea that Lodowick is just really awkward and is trying to say the nice things.
Okay.
We may change this once we've done scene 11. But I think, when he's saying to Shaw that, other people will help you, and, the Duke of Gloucester's great, this kind of moment, and you just go, no, I'm doomed. You know, if everything that Lodowick is doing is actually relatively perky, then that gives your doom and gloom, you know, once you hit the doom and gloom, because he brings you up and then he brings you down again and then he brings you up. And, you know, if Lodowick is actually genuine at this stage, we may change our minds, but I quite like that as a thing. I like the idea that you are loitering somewhere with intent. I mean, we're never going to communicate to the audience where you are loitering. It could be outside your shop. You could be just shutting doors or moving some stuff or doing something with your maid, or you could be loitering at a gate. But I think the idea that you are loitering with intent,
Okay.
is the right one. I don't think you're journeying. If that
No,
makes sense.
okay. So then there's probably going to be a bit more tension in her because she's more worried about people overhearing them if she's standing still. So a bit more kind of whispery, bit more intimate, and not so relaxed. Okay. Is that work for you?
It's only that first speech. I don't think. I think every so often you might exclaim, as it were. We've got a thing. If you exclaim against fortune when you first start, so it's maybe that there's this locked in, pacey thing, and then fortune. You know that there's a. But then you pull it back again. You notice everyone's watching you, and that kind of thing. That might work quite nicely.
Okay.
So Citizen is wants his money. Grabby money, give me. And Morton is please dog at my homework. I'm liking that. Any additional questions or thoughts about this scene before we go to the meteor text, as it were? Not that there isn't lots of meat here, but I don't want to linger anymore. Okay, let's start turning our pages to scene 11. We're not looking at scene 11 in action until Friday. So stuff to remember, stuff to discuss as we go, stuff we can change after tomorrow's run of scene 3 in the rest of the play. So there's all sorts of options there, and see how it goes. So we reach a point just before the halfway mark in the play, where Shaw's wife's declining fortunes have precipitately dropped. We have gone from the king's dead, I'm probably in really bad situation, and people are telling you it'll be fine. People are telling you it'll be fine. That's the thing about scene 3. Is the king dead? Yes. Shit. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Okay, you don't necessarily believe them. Now we get to another public place, but this is much more public. I think this is definitely bell round neck, market square kind of thing, where you are considerably worse off. So we're going to work through this text again. We're going to encounter pretty much all those people we encountered before. We're also going to encounter at least one additional people. And the question is, are we going to add more bodies to this, or could we add more bodies? We probably won't for the run, but it's an interesting question. Sarah?
Just before we begin, can I just ask a couple of questions?
Oh, please do.
So I know there's the whole bit with her having to go and do penance. Is this during that, or is this after that? Or, basically, is it during or after?
I think it's during.
It's during.
I think this is all part of it.
So she's got her candle and she's...
Yeah,
right.
I think we can ask the question as we go whether that makes sense, but I think that fits.
Okay, and can I also ask, how is she dressed? Because this will make a difference to how she's going to react. Is she kind of in her shift, or is she completely naked? Or has she got some kind of something on her? Has she got something written on her forehead? Did I read somewhere? Or what's going on with her in terms of how she is presented to the world?
Alan?
I'm just wondering whether a shift and the scarlet letter A, whether that's historically in the right period, I don't know.
Yeah, it's, something like that might be appropriate. I don't know off the top of my head precisely. I would suspect that she's in some sort of not nice garments. Whether it's
very basic shift.
Yeah, I also think you're probably quite dishevelled and dirty as well. Which I think the thing is, people do not recognise you, or do they? This is the question. Do they pretend not to recognise you? That's something we'll answer as we go through it, I think. A suggestion in chat of sackcloth and ashes, which, again, is also... I mean, there's an element we can make just a decision rather than... but it's important that we don't go against what the text suggests. Helen and Aliki.
Yes, I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I was under the impression that the formal penance, the shift, the barefoot, the candle, was over, and that this was her now destitute, so wearing something extraordinarily poor because all her good clothes have been sold, and not having a maid, she would therefore be somewhat dishevelled, because you can't take proper care of yourself in early modern times without servants' assistance. So I think the distinction is that previously she has been well turned out and wearing rich-ish but not over ostentatious fabrics, and she's now wearing very, very poor fabrics and looking a mess.
I was just wondering about it from the level, the perspective of like how, because if she's already done her penance, she will still be obviously in a complete state in terms of how she looks, but in terms of her internal, like emotional life, if she's already done her penance, there'll be a sense that she's beginning to deal with what she's been through, or at least she'll be coping with it. Whereas if she's actually in the middle of it, then that's going to change the dynamic of how she's feeling internally, because it's all new and it's all happening and it's all fuck.
I think what we need to do is get into the scene to find out whether the scene explicitly tells us that or not. If it gives us the options, then there are several routes through this scene that we could take.
Okay.
One of the questions here is actually, is this opening speech and several of the other opening speeches, is it an aside or is it said to as a public text?
Oh,
or
so
could
she's
it work as both? I'm not saying it probably is written as an aside, but as we now come crashing into scenes which are not just about misogyny, but also have some internalized misogyny in the characters, how we perform that and how we deal with that now starts coming to the fore. So there are the interesting questions. So for the moment, we'll just read and stop and start as we did before, but we may do a little more detail if we have time. So Shaw's wife opens the scene with, in some level of lessened status, thusly.
Ah, unfortunate Shaw's wife, dishonour to the king, a shame to thy country, and the only blot of defame to all thy kindred. Aye, why was I made fair that a king should favour me? But my friends should have preferred discipline before affection, for they know of my folly. Yea, my own husband knew of my breach of disloyalty, and yet suffered me, by reason he knew it bootless to kick against the brick. Ah, sweet King Edward, little didst thou think Shaw's wife should have been so hardly used. Thy unnatural brother, not content with my goods, which are yet confiscated his custody, but yet more to add to my present misery, hath proclaimed upon the great penalty that none whatsoever shall either aid or succour me. But here being comfortless to die in the streets with hunger, I am constrained to beg, but it is in vain, for none will pity me. Yet here come one to whom I have done good in restoring his lands that were lost. Now will I try him to see if he will give me anything.
And there we have the answer to the question. So yes, it's you have been told that after whatever presumed penance that you've done, that no one is going to give you any succour or relief. You are homeless without the ability to beg.
Excuse me.
It's and that's something that Richard has done. Or Richard has proclaimed. We haven't seen the proclamation. It was, I think, mentioned in the previous scene, literally just before it happens here. And we get to the interesting question of, the Richard's proclamations or things have to be enacted by other people, which I find really fascinating by this. This wouldn't work if everyone just ignored him. So yeah, you are there trying to beg from someone who we've met earlier. And yeah, so you're in your. I think someone put in the chat. What was it? Street homeless as a general look. That's that I think is the where we're at, rather than just simply a moment of penance and a sort of formal look for that. We're going to move forward before we go back, as it were. We have the entrance of Lodowick. Lodowick. I don't actually know how we want to pronounce that. Yes. So, who is he talking to, and how does this function?
Our time, how thou sufferest fortune to alter estates, and changest the mind of the good for the worst. How many headless peers sleep in their graves, whose places are furnished with their inferiors, such as are neither nobly born nor virtuously minded. My heart hardly bewails the loss of the young king by the outrage of the protector, who has proclaimed himself king by the name of Richard III. The commons murmur at it greatly, that the young king and his brother should be imprisoned. But to what end is hard to say, but many thinks they shall never come forth again. But God do all for the best, and that the right heirs may not be utterly overthrown.
Oh, gods, what a grief is it for me to ask where I have given.
Ah, my good Lord Hastings, how innocently thou didst the heavens bear witness.
Good sir, take pity upon me and relieve me.
Indeed, 'tis pity to see so fair a face to ask for alms. But tell me, hast thou no friends?
Yes, sir. I had many friends, but when my chiefest friend of all died, the rest then forsook me.
Belike, then, thy face was notorious, that thy friends leaving thee would let thee go, as a spoil for villains. But hearest thou, I prithee tell me the truth, and as I am a gentleman, I will pity thee.
Oh, Lodowick, tell thee the truth. Why have this entreaty served thee when thy lands had been clean gone, had it not been for Shaw's wife? And dost thou make me so long to beg for a little?
Indeed, my lands are had restored me by Mistress Shaw. But may this be she?
I, Lodowick. I am she that begged thy lands of King Edward IV. Therefore, I pray thee, bestow something on me.
Oh, gods, what is this world, and how uncertain are riches? Is this she that was in such credit with the king? Nay, more, that could command a king indeed? I cannot deny, but my land she restored me. But shall I, by relieving of her, hurt myself? No. For straight proclamation is made that none shall succour her. Therefore, for fear I should be seen to talk with her, I will shun her company and get me to my chamber, and there set down in heroical verse the shameful end of a king's concubine, which is no doubt as wonderful as the defoliation of a kingdom.
Exit Lodowick. Everyone forgotten that, hadn't you? You'd all forgotten that bit. I think this fits really well with the idea that Lodowick is, thinks of himself as this good person who's trying to be, because when he first comes in, he's really on message. God, we've seen what's going on in the land. It's awful. you know, oh, my Lord Hastings, oh, this is so bad. And then this poor beggar, you know, and he says nice things to her, and then finds out who it is and goes, whoa, no, and just goes and does not recognise her. And I don't think he doesn't recognise her. I think I don't think he pretends not to recognise her. I just don't think he recognises her. So that makes a lot of sense, Alan.
I can see that the opening tranche, the first speech, is effectively to the audience oblique soliloquy. And then they're not actually interacting. But I'm then very puzzled by this line, "Ah, my good Lord Hastings."
It's a continuation. Shaw's wife needs a run-up, so Shaw's next line is also an aside. It's like Shaw's wife is plucking up the courage to beg.
Right, okay, that makes more sense. So if effectively what we've got is 3 bits of soliloquy from Lodowick, with Shaw's wife just not interrupting, not interreacting, but just effectively soliloquizing herself.
Yeah, there's one aside from Shaw's wife in the middle of it, yeah. Our gods, what grief is me. You continue your soliloquy, and then she talks to you. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense. But I sort of hit it, and I thought,
yeah,
WTF's going on here?
No, that "Ah, my good Lord Hastings" is a continuation of that aside. And here's the thing: is that I think, you know, if possible, it's that sort of thing of all of these things is slightly leaned in. It's just, what are we going to do? I mean, it's awful. And the question for Sarah as Shaw, as Mistress Shaw, is how much upstaging can we dare let you do? Because it is about that of going to ask this person for help. You know, and you've done good to him, so you're hopeful, but also you don't want him to see you like this. So there's a certain pride things. It's not like you're asking alms of a total stranger. This is someone you know. So there's that journey and then you to get to, and it's like that aside. Our gods, what a grief it is for me to ask. Is where you've gone to ask him, and then it's, I can't do it. I have to do it, and then you do. And then he continues to talk at the end after the exchange, which is relatively straightforward. But it's like the moment he knows who you are, he doesn't actually really talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
Indeed, my lords, I had restored me by Mistress Shaw. Is a semi-aside. It could be both. It could be said to her. It could just be said to the audience, and then he never talks to you again.
It's like he can't look me in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a reasonable amount of time for Alan, if you are going to be leaning forward and talking direct to the camera as much as you can, if you can. Again, you know, for the second look. You know, if we can do these things, it's lovely. But if it's not practical, then that's fine. We're marking this as much the thinking of getting this on a stage as well. What kind of things might come with this?
So effective. The whole of the sequence, lean into camera.
Yeah. When you're not talking to her, lean into camera. Yeah, which isn't much. 1, 2, literally two bits of dialogue actually talk to her directly. And it's this thing. It feels very. There's a lot of moments where people turn to the audience in a very Brechtian way, and just go, "What am I going to do? Or this is awful." You know what? And I feel that that's something that for anyone who's in the room, who's not in the room, if as it were, who you know, if you've got moments like that when you're going through your script to say, right, is this an aside, or could this be made into an aside? Is this something where you just want to just look to the audience and say? I mean, the host, for example, has a similar moment. I think when it's talking about the keys and dobbing in Hastings. I think I'm not making that up. Someone does that anyway, and pretty much just goes to the audience and goes, "Well, what would you do?" And so everybody hopefully has a moment, at least one moment like that in the play. And I think for Zoom, just that lean in, just try and look that digital audience in the face and say, what would you do in this situation? And there may be moments when there are lines where we can almost do that Brechtian exercise of just saying, she said at the end, he said at the end of the line. which I wouldn't do it live, but just in your own mind of just going, how does that frame the action? Sorry, I've been talking a lot. I'll stop doing that. Other thoughts? Aliki.
So you were talking before about the misogyny and how it comes out. And for me, I think this is the crucial moment, because the reasons Lodowick rejects her aren't misogynist. They're, just pure self-interest. But then he spins that to himself about how I'm not a coward. I'm not ungrateful. This is the comeuppance of sluts. That's what happens when you're a slut. I'm not sure what it is we might be able to do around that on Zoom to highlight it. But that's really key to me for saying that I don't think the scene is at all misogynist, really, in that part. But it's highlighting it.
I mean, that moment is about, is about misogyny, as it were. I think that's how we should read it. I mean, he would be going away writing a blog on Britlark, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. And of course, Lodowick has to think of himself as a nice person still.
Yeah, exactly. And that's his excuse. It's not that he's not a nice person. It's that she's a slut. And well, you can't help sluts. My goodness. Look, they're punished.
Yeah. Alan.
I must admit, I'm seeing it far more as a question of realpolitik.
Yes.
He's a courtier who's on the rise, effectively, as a servant to Hastings. And the powers that be have decreed that Shaw's wife is untouchable, is an unperson. So I'm actually seeing more resonances with, 1930s Soviet Russia or the 1984 world than I am with misogyny.
Okay.
Sorry, Aliki.
Sorry, it's fine. It's just, I think he's just trying to preserve his own sense of being a good person.
Yeah, I think he is, but he's also complying with,
yes,
the powers that be.
But the psychological tactic he chooses is that it must be her fault.
We have a question, and it's always important when people ask themselves questions. I cannot deny but my land she restored me, but shall I by leaving of her hurt myself? I think that's the key pivot on that. No for straight and then you come to the conclusion, and then you take it a step further. And you didn't need to take it a step further. You don't need to write a heroical verse. You can walk away from her.
Yeah,
that's enough. But you're actually deciding to side with the status quo. And I think in our current climate, and that's what's really, really hitting with me at the moment, is that's what the former government of the US was manoeuvring on a daily basis, and has a deep-rooted misogynistic root to it, as well as the additional levers that it may also be moving. Additional different thoughts before we move on? No. Okay. Shaw's wife has a speech in reaction to this. And then we once again meet the citizen. So we have a little citizen moment. So we'll run that through. I won't read the stage direction for the entrance or exit of the citizen.
Oh, Lodowick, if thou wilt give me nothing, yet stay and talk with me. Oh, no. He shuns my company. All my friends now forsake me. In prosperity, I had many, but in adversity, none. Oh, gods, have I this for my good I have done? For when I was in my chiefest pomp, I thought that day well spent, wherein I might pleasure my friend by suits to the king. For if I had spoken, he would not have said nay. Although he was king, yet Shaw's wife swayed the sword. I where need was. I where need was. I where need was. There was I bountiful, and mindful I was still upon the poor to relieve them, and now none will know me nor succour me. Therefore here shall I die for want of sustenance. Yet here comes another whom I have done good unto in saving the life of his son. Well, I will try him to see if he will give me anything.
No men, no laws, no princes, no orders. All's hushed, neighbor. Now he's king. But before he was king, how was the Thames thwacked with ruffians? With what phrase had we in the streets? Now he hath proclaimed peace between Scotland and England for 6 years. To what end I know not.
Ah, good sir, relieve me. Oh, sorry, Eric. I thought you...
I did that earlier. It's fine. It's payback. Usurpers had need to be wise.
Oh, good sir, relieve me and bestow something upon me.
Ah, neighbor, hedges have her eyes and highways have ears, but who is a beggar woman? The streets are full of them in faith. But here is thou. Hast thou no friends that thou goest begging so?
Yes, sir, I had friends, but they are all dead, as you are.
What, am I dead, neighbor? What, thou arrant queen, what meanst thou that by that?
I mean they are dead in charity. But I pray, sir, had not you the life of your son saved in the time of King Edward IV by one Shaw's wife?
Yea, marry had I, but art thou a spring of the same bough? I promise you, neighbor, I thought so. So idle housewife could not be without the acquaintance of so noble a strumpet. Well, for her sake, I'll give thee somewhat.
Oh, nay, then know that I am she that saved the life of thy condemned son.
Who art thou? Shore's wife? Lie still, purse. Neighbor, I would not for 20 pounds have given her 1 farthing. The proclamation is so hard by King Richard. Why, minion, are you she that was the dishonor to the king, the shame to her husband, the discredit to the city? I hear you. Lay your fingers to work and get thereby somewhat to maintain you. Oh, neighbor, I grow very choleric. And thou didst save the life of my son. Why, if thou hadst not, another would, and for my part, I would he had been hanged 7 years ago. It had saved me a great deal of money then. But come, let us go in and let the queen alone.
Alas, thus am I become an open shame to the world. Here shall I die in the streets for want of sustenance. Alas, is my fact so heinous that none will pity me? Oh, yet here comes another to whom I have done good, who is least able to pleasure me, yet I will try to see him. I will try him to see if he will give me anything.
And before that person comes in, so the citizen's entering with somebody else. So this is none of. I think these citizen lines are asides. These are public speech. You've got someone with you. You are in public mode throughout, unless we find anything that might make an interesting aside. And that element. And how do we feel about that scene? What going on there? Any thoughts, Eric?
Well, I thought he was sort of what's it called, like when they're sharing a fence and talking to each other over the fence kind of thing. But I don't know if that's just me, because that was why you couldn't see the second neighbor in my head. I don't know.
Alan.
Just one small text point. In Shaw's wife's first speech after the exit of Lodwick, wherein I might pleasure my friend by suits, I think that should be friends, plural. Would make more sense of the sequence that follows.
Maybe. I'm not
because
sold either way.
You're now getting a succession of those that she favoured.
Yeah, but she hasn't seen anyone else yet. She's only seen Lodwick so far. It could be friends. Absolutely could be friends. I'm not saying...
I think it makes more sense that way.
More importantly, the I where need was, the I is A-Y-E rather than a capital
I.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I popped it in the chat, but I thought I'd say it out loud. That's my bad. I thought I got most of those, but they do occasionally come in to bite us on the arse.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the citizen, there's a public performance element to this. You will have someone with you, so they'll be encouraging you and nodding with you. And you've got to remember, Shaw's wife saved your son.
But I would have
And
him hanged because it's cheaper.
Well, quite, yes.
and you are going to give money. For her sake, I'll give thee somewhat. And you go to, you've got money. You're going to give it, and then the turnaround is so fast. And it's the question: is that because there's someone else with you, or is it because that's just what you would do, or did you already know who it was and you're just play acting, so that you have an excuse not to give the money, and you were never going to give the money at all, and it's all a lie. I'm throwing up lots of options here, and to some degree, it's entirely up to you how you do that. It doesn't actually necessarily change how, Shaw's motivation is still going to be desperate. Please, I saved your son. Help me. Look, I'm really Jane Shaw. Helen.
It seems to me that his anger comes out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks well of Jane Shaw. He was about to give money in memory, effectively, of Jane Shaw. Suddenly he realizes how close he is coming to treason. And his fear makes him very, very angry.
Mm.
I think it's an instinctive thing. I don't think this is a thought-through reaction or a reaction of which he will be particularly proud tomorrow.
It's an interesting question about the citizen as well. What he's talking about when he first comes on, he sounds. Is he quite pro-king here? I'm not quite sure how to read that. Because it's all's hushed, neighbour. Now he's king. There used to be all these ruffians about. There's peace between Scotland and England. It's like the trains are all running on time. It's great. I don't know if that's the way to read it. Because in that case, his rejection is also part of it's on message for him. If that makes sense, that's the new regime. That's what the new regime said. Well, then I will very openly demonstrate that I reject who you are as a practical thing. Thoughts in the room? Agree, disagree? I'm just trying to throw up options at the moment. Eric.
Yeah, I was wondering that because there is a bit where he goes, "Who art thou, Shaw's wife?" Like, why are you asking? She just told you, kind of thing. So it's like, is he repeating it for the sake of someone who is kind of there and sort of, no, neighbor, I would not for £20 have given her 1 farthing if I knew that. But also, he seems like the kind of guy I don't know who in modern day, in current affairs would just not be happy with any regime, just voting for the regime, but to stay the same. But then he wouldn't be happy about it anyway. He just kind of, so long as until he gets his money, of course.
Hedges have eyes, highways have ears, but who is this beggar woman? Sorry, Aliki.
So several things. One, I think it's completely plausible that he didn't recognize her until he got up close. People often, especially people who don't know you well, they get quite surface things like, your beautiful piled up hair and your fancy velvet wimple, or whatever it was. So if she doesn't have that anymore, it might be that only when he comes up close to her to give her money does he see that she is in fact who she says she is. Or in fact, it's a way of processing it. Who did you say you were? Did you say you were Shaw's wife? Oh, shit. I think you can also read it that he doesn't like the regime with exactly the same lines. What's going on? There are no wars. There's no commerce. Nothing happening. Maybe that's, and that it could be also, it can be a public repudiation. It can also be a way of justifying it to himself because it goes so over the top. Oh yeah, I'd rather my son was hanged. He's eating me out of house and home. Yeah, right.
It's the line, neighbour, I would not for £20 have given her 1 farthing. It's maybe that's a justification to his friend. Maybe it's actually there's some shame there. It's just going, well, the proclamation is so hard I don't give it. So there are real options there. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when you've got a citizen with you reacting, because that should be Tamara. So I may give Tamara some secret motivations, secret actions to keep you on your toes.
Oh, no.
I might not tell you what's going to happen, or I
Well,
might.
I mean,
forget.
you never do.
No, I don't. I like people to make their own decisions and then see what chaos ensues.
Informer alert.
Right. So we've got one more CNET to go. So we've dealt with the citizen. We've dealt with Shaw's wife. So Lodowick. Lodowick just arrives by himself. The citizen arrives. There are two of them. Enter Morton now, but we will also have a lurking presence who will enter mid-scene. We will read this down to the end of the scene and then make some comments and decisions and thoughts.
Now, sir, who but King Richard bears sway, and hath proclaimed John, Earl of Lincoln, heir apparent to the crown? The young princes, they are in the Tower. Nay, some says more, they are murdered. But this makes me to muse. The Duke of Buckingham and the King is at such variance that did all in all help him to the crown. But the Duke of Buckingham is rid down to Brecknock Castle in Wales, and there he means to raise up a power to pull down the usurper. But let them agree as they will, for the next fair wind, I'll overseas.
Oh, Shaw's wife so near driven to peg of a serving man. Why, necessity hath no law, I must needs. Good sir, relieve me and give me something.
Why, what art thou?
In brief, Morton, I am Shaw's wife that have done good to all.
A fool, and ever thy own enemy. In truth, Mistress Shaw, my store is but small, yet as it is will part stakes. But soft, I cannot do what I would. I am watched.
Good Morton, relieve me.
What? Should I relieve my king's enemy?
Why, thou promised thou would.
I tell thee I will not, and so be answered. Sounds I would with all my heart, but for yonder villain, plague on him.
An honest fellow, I warrant him. How now, Shaw's wife, will none relieve thee?
No, none will relieve her that hath been good to all.
Why, 'twere pity to do thee good, but methinks she is fulsome and stinks.
If I be fulsome, shun my company, for none but thy lord sought my misery, and he hath undone me.
Why, hath he undone thee? Nay, thy wicked and naughty life hath undone thee. But if thou wantest maintenance, why dost thou not fall to thine old trade again?
Nay, villain, I have done open penance, and am sorry for my sins that are past.
Zounds! Is Shaw's wife become an holy whore? Nay, then we shall never have done.
Why, hang thee. If thy faults were written in thy forehead as mine is, it would be as wrong with thee. But I prithee, leave me, and get thee from me.
And cannot you keep the city, but you must run gadding to the court? And you stay here a little longer, I'll make you be set away. And for my part, would all whores were so served, and then there would be fewer in England than there be. And so farewell, good Mistress Shaw.
And all such usurping kings as thy lord is may come to a shameful end, which no doubt I may live yet to see. Therefore, sweet God, forgive all my foul offence, and though I have done wickedly in this world, into hell fire, let not my soul be hurled.
And exit. And we hit those last three lines with so many problems. But I think let's deal with the dynamic, interesting things first that are just slightly more fun before we get to the more difficult things. So, question: is Morton entering with a serving man, or is he talking to the audience? Are there more people on stage now? at this moment.
I think he's alone.
I definitely want the page to enter earlier than is marked in the script, Liza. That's just a general note you can enter at
around but soft.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So that you're definitely, he may not notice you, but you've got to already be on and about, looking suspiciously. You could be on much, much earlier, but at the other end of the room. Walk towards the camera, going, hang on. Very slowly.
If I could activate my camera remotely, believe me, I would.
Oh, you could crawl along the floor. Nobody would notice. Get the cat to do it.
Milo, you're not in the camera.
But yeah, I kind of think the Morton does work as someone going to a member of the audience, going, "Now, sir, who but the king, but King Richard bears sway." I think that works, but I'm also really it's interesting. Does the citizen with the citizen, the spare random citizen, does he exit with the citizen, or is he still just loitering, standing in the background, just going? And have a few more people wandered by? How public is this? For the purposes of Friday, probably not very public, but I'll again keep it relatively simple. But there are lots of options here. Thoughts?
It's easier to play if Morton is actually talking to somebody, whether it's the audience or the or a random citizen. I sort of did it as if I played it just now as if he was talking to himself, and it didn't feel right.
Tell you what, I'll come on with you.
Oh.
In this scene, there does seem to be there seems to be a quite clear distinction between Morton talking to be heard and Morton speaking his own feelings.
Yeah.
Like just the interchanges with Shore. A fool and ever thine own enemy could be loud, and then the stuff to Shore, in truth, Mistress Shore, could be quieter. And then, what should I relieve my king's enemy is for the public good.
Yeah.
I tell thee I will not, also public. Zoons, I would.
Yeah.
Private.
I was going to say that really do note those difference between the public speech, which can be slightly fake, if that or forced.
For me, the line "a fool ever thy own enemy" was more of an aside, almost, just sort of like, she's always been a fool, always been her own worst enemy, kind of thing. Just almost himself, actually, rather than the audience. I don't know.
I'd argue that the use of thou says that it might be addressed to her, but it's your line. Play it as you feel.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Sorry, I wasn't looking up. Alan?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, actually, there is a sort of symmetry here, because Lodowick's opening speech, well, going through, Shore's wife is a soliloquy, I think, at the top of the scene. Lodowick's opening speech is effectively exposition monkey type material, so to the audience. Similar situation when you get the citizen, whether he's to the audience or whether it's to this other citizen. And similarly again with Morton. They're all basically trying to give the backstory rather than interacting with anybody explicitly.
I don't think I disagree with. I agree with that. I mean, it's not so much just about backstory; it's how they're relating to the world that they're walking on stage with, and who they're talking to is slightly different each time. I think the citizen is explicitly talking to another person. When he enters, he's not talking to the audience at all.
Yeah, backstory may be the wrong phrase, but basically the world outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts? No. Okay, then let's leap to the page. The page's all-purpose spy figure standing in the background making notes. It's I kind of, I don't know if I see you with a genuine notebook or something, a pen, whether that's necessary or just simply that you just keep sort of sauntering past the camera. Actually, of just going, because you don't need to do anything. You just need to be there.
I don't think the page is necessarily writing stuff down. I think the point is that he's seeing, and he will report what he sees.
Aliki, unless you're just holding your hand in a position. No, you're just your hand is just in a position.
It's a bit like being at an auction. If you scratch your nose, you've suddenly bought 12 sheep.
Yeah, well, we've all done that.
Whole flock off.
Yeah, and yeah, there's an interesting the way Shaw and the page interact, and you get the impression they've had this conversation before. That he comes by every day. This page and he keeps doing this, and actually towards the end maybe Shaw's is almost semi-violent with them. Get thee from me, and it's just so that the page's final retort is actually, no, I can make it worse for you.
Mm-hmm.
To cow you into that last point where your last bit is a flinging line at the retreating back, before we then have to decide what we're doing with the final 3 lines. Aliki.
Okay, so Richard is very explicit about how much he wants Jane Shore to suffer when he orders this. And the page is always his proxy. So I think it's quite possible that, he was the one who came to her house with the armed men and said, right, you're going to be doing penance now. Let's seize all your goods. I can totally see that.
Mm. And especially the casualness of what Richard does as well, because he doesn't personally care. Aliki may disagree with this, but it's this is for effect. This may be for a separate forum and a separate thing, but do disagree with me if you would like, because I was wondering on that point.
Well, I think it is personal because I think it's a narcissistic injury. He can't bear that she should have any power or any prestige. So he's going to destroy her completely. That's my...
Excellent. Well, get more on that when we do it next time. I obviously misremembered, so that is lovely. Excellent. Eric?
I was just going to say that it's probably just like sort of, after these 3 people that she's actually helped have, declined her, the page just comes to stomp all over that, because obviously sort of he's the final blow. So it's just like coming to, sweep up the pieces and clear her off, basically.
Yeah, and that works also dramatically, of course. We need a way that the scene ends, and the scene ends with someone she really can't stand to be around, who also tells her to shut off.
So let's now address that final question, those last 3 lines. How do we perform them? What do we do with them? Because it's very internalized. It's what everyone's saying, that you're doing this foul offense, you've done wickedly, you're hoping you won't go to hell. What do we do with that?
Well, I have a vague recollection that when we did this originally, and certainly if you read the lines as they just as they come, it seems like a sort of penitent prayer. But I have a vague recollection when we did the first look on this, that I remember thinking you could read that a different way. You could actually read that with a degree of defiance and kind of spit it out, which personally I think makes more psychological sense given what she's just been through. Because she's just had a series of men basically, spurn her, and so at this point her feelings about humanity, I think, are probably going to be at an all-time low. because it's interesting. She starts off in scene 3 saying, "Oh, all my friends are going to leave me," but it's theoretical at that point. Whereas in this scene, she's actually experienced it. She's experienced like 1, 2, 3, 4 metaphorical slaps in the face that just get harder and harder. And so for her to then suddenly turn around and go, "Oh yes, I am. Forgive me, sweet God, all my foul offence, and I have done wickedly in this world. Let my soul not be hurled into fire." Yeah, okay. Maybe she's going that way, but I think there's something quite interesting about actually making that internal inner. It's almost like a promise to herself that she's not going to die in the street, that she's actually going to, fuck you all, and I'm going to come through this, which obviously appeals to me, playing it that way. But it's only one. It's not necessarily the way it reads on the page. I am aware of this.
Francis.
Yeah, I think you could also read those lines with a certain measure of dignity. Sort of, okay, I've been through all of this, but I'm not going to be. I'm going to keep my dignity. I'm not going to, I'm not going to whine. I'm just going to soldier on, kind of thing.
Aliki.
I remember when we did it the first read, because I read her, and I didn't know what to do when I got to those lines, and I read them straight as humiliation and humility. And I remember Sarah saying that they could be defiance. And I think that's so much more interesting, because the scene then goes, instead of going thunk, 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 shook on Jane, it goes thunk, 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 and that's kind of more fun.
Well, the thing is, if we were still mid-penance, which, the text doesn't quite lean in that direction, but it doesn't explicitly say that wouldn't quite work, is actually she could enter with those 3 lines, as those are the official script that she is handed on the streets. Mm-hmm. And so this is actually, she has a moment of "fuck you" to the retreating back of the page, and then there's a moment of put the clapperboard back on, get the bell.
Gather.
For God's, therefore, sweet God, forgive all my foul offence, and goes off as came on. I don't think we'll do that for this version per se, but if I was staging it, that's probably how I would do it. Because it gets you on stage in a slightly more interesting way. But also I'd probably be doing other things on stage at the end of this scene anyway, because that's probably where I would normally put the interval, with a separate Richard coronation procession happening simultaneously with your scene, as a way of closing a not desperately easy to find an interval place in a script issue. So yeah, Sarah, to some degree, it's dealer's choice. It's your scene. You can deliver those last 3 lines how you like. I remember when we first read it, I just said I'd probably cut them. I see no reason not to cut them. It's a great end line to say, all such usurping kings as my lord is may come to a shameful end, which no doubt I may live yet to see. It's quite a good way to close a scene, however badly I read it. I don't know how many words I put in or took out there, so that was a Dadaist approach to reading of words. Okay, we've pretty much reached the end of this session. We haven't come up with absolute answers to everything. There's an element of still throwing things at the wall for a second look to find out what sticks. I'm still primarily looking for options, but does anyone have any final thoughts or suggestions about what might be done with Jane Shaw? And who talks about herself not only in the third person but as Shaw's wife as well at one point, which is really weird. Any final thoughts in the room? No, yes, Eric.
I don't know. I'm undivided. I'm divided, like sort of undecided about this, because I don't know how that works in modern day times, but I mean, it just kind of goes like, "Ah, Shore's wife so near driven to beg of a serving man." It's like, yes, this is such a great fall for me, kind of. It's like me, the wife of the president. Well, not president, but I mean, the equivalent. Or, but I don't know if she actually thinks of herself as that highly in status, because she's kind of like, all she did was actually love a king, basically.
Depending on your interpretation of the story.
Yeah, depending, yes.
And it's interesting to beg of a serving man as well. So, she's begging of lower and lower status people as we go. And that's an important point we haven't brought up, is the status of people. So remember, the citizen is someone who's got a fair amount of money, not as much status as Lodowick. Lodowick, you are absolutely... entitled, full of entitlement all over the shop, and it's spilling left, right, and centre. And then Morton is just some bloke.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yes, I just had a question. I knew I'd read it somewhere. Why hang thee, she's talking to the page, if thy faults were so written in thy forehead as mine is, it would be as wrong with thee. Is she being metaphorical there, or does she actually have something written on her forehead?
She might have ashes. Sometimes penitents have ashes on their forehead. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're going in that direction of Alan's suggestion from earlier, though probably anachronistic, but the idea that there's some sort of branding might be, or some sort of indicator, and again, also helps disguise who she is. Helen, then Alan. Muted at the moment, Helen.
I was going to say what Liza said. A smear of ash would be the most likely thing.
Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, I know Liza came back and said that it was an anachronism for the Scarlet Letter. Whether that was an anachronism at the time the play is set or at the time the play was performed is an interesting question that might be worth exploring. And also I've noted that this is the last point at which Shore's wife makes an appearance anyway.
There are literally 2 scenes with Shore's wife in this play.
And that's it. This is her final exit.
And nobody ever calls her Jane. She's in the script, and not even, as Alexandra said in the chat, I very nearly, actually, when reformatting it, changed it to Jane Shore, but I didn't, because it just seems very, very weird.
Doesn't that in itself, though, say something about her lack of agency? I mean, it's a completely different situation, but it makes me think of the second wife in Rebecca, who never has a name. And it's because she doesn't really have any agency in this play. And I'm thinking about this very much in relation to Edward IV, where she has a lot more agency, and she's called Jane. So I don't know, there might be something in that, maybe. Deliberate, I don't know.
Well, Edward IV is a later play. That doesn't mean there weren't other Edward IV or other Jane Shore material in dramatic literature that we don't have, but also there is other material that we haven't actually really looked into, and at some point we will. We will get round to. Mirror for Magistrates is another good source, which is something I'm going to be exploring on the Patreon from next month, hopefully, he said, fingers crossed. So there will be starting to look at the Mirror for Magistrates there as exclusive Patreon content. All that remains after that terrible, terrible plug is to say that this is an ongoing process of trying to understand what characters are doing, how scenes are functioning. The more we do, the more we find, the more complex everything gets. We're doing a second look run at the true tragedy of Richard III over 2 sessions. They'll be in videos following this relatively soon after this appears over the next couple of days, or if you're watching it in the future, a few steps along in the video feed. And again, we'll be looking at the play at pace and seeing how it all flows and fits together. We think it's an absolutely fabulous play full of options and possibilities, as well as things that maybe we want to slightly adjust. but it is eminently stage-worthy and rather excellent. Thank you very much to all the readers, everyone lurking as well, who've contributed notes in the chat, and I think it's time for me to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.